we're tribal. We're tribal species. We thrive by being connected, by having a sense of belonging. It goes back to our essence and founding as a human society. If you weren't in a tribe, you'd be eaten by something. And so this sense of isolation that we have today is disproportionately meaningful to our DNA.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Thrive State Podcast. I am your host, Dr. V, triple board certified MD and performance and longevity expert. And on today's podcast, I give you a very special treat with one of my very good friends. He is the New York Times best-selling author of Never Eat Alone and an expert in human connection relationships. His work has been broadcasted throughout organizations throughout the globe. He's an iconic leader in human connection and how to build human systems in these organizations for high performance and for prosperity. On today's podcast, we really talk about creating your circle of support, how to create a community that has your back. Did you know that the average American does not feel like they have somebody in their life that has their back? 50% of Americans feel this way. And of that 50%, 60% of them are actually married. It is less important of how many relationships you have, but how deep do those relationships go? The more we foster these deep and nurturing relationships, the more we can have better health, better performance, and live up to our potential, because it is the who in our life that will transform our health. You know, we as human beings, we increase oxytocin in our body when we feel deeply connected with other people. And we learn how to actually do that. Today's podcast is going to unveil the secrets to being able to build these powerful, nurturing relationships. If you are new to the podcast, welcome in. This is a place where every week I have the unique opportunity to bring world leaders, thought leaders in the world of biohacking, technology, science, ancient wisdom, and spirituality, to give you the tools and tactics to reclaim your health, to put you into what I call the Thrive State. If you are new to my world and want a kickstart in your performance and longevity journey, go to thrivestatestarter.com. There are a lot of great resources in that bundle, including breathwork, including interviews from the world thought leaders in health and performance. Go to thrivestatestarter.com. And if you want a place to audit your life in the areas that are most going to transform your health, your relationships, and your business, go to mythrivestate.com/toolkit to get that. Now, on to today's conversation. This is a conversation from my Thrive State Summit, where I had a chance to interview 50 of the world's thought leaders in mental and emotional wellness. And this conversation is going to blow your mind, because this conversation is truly about relationships. How are relationships so important for our health? How are relationships so important for our success in nearly every area of life? And are we conscious of how we start to curate or cultivate these relationships? This podcast will give you the tools and tactics to do so. So ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy this beautiful conversation with myself and my good friend, Keith Ferrazzi. Welcome back to another session of the Thrive State Summit. I'm here with very dear friend, Keith Ferrazzi. He's an American author, entrepreneur, business consultant, best known for his book, Never Eat Alone, which focusing on networking and building relationships in the business world. But what I can say as a friend and a brother is how he takes the same approach to his personal network and relationships as well. He has a very successful career working with companies such as Deloitte and Starwood Hotels, and has been recognized as a thought leader in the field of professional development. He's also been a frequent contributor to publications such as Harvard Business Review and Forbes. Through his work, Ferrazzi, my good friend Keith, strives to help individuals and organizations achieve their goals through the power of authentic connections and partnerships. Keith, thanks for being in the summit.
Doc, it's great to see you. Anytime I get to spend with you is a real pleasure.
Well, thank you so much. I wanted to bring you here, particularly for this conversation, is really on building a tribe, building a community, because we know that loneliness or the feeling of being alone is such a big, big contributor to mental health issues. Why is it that it is, you think, so difficult for people to be more vulnerable and to attract a tribe that sees them for themselves?
Well, there's a number of questions layered in that. Let me go back to a wonderful book that was written called Bowling Alone. And in that book, it was in the 90s. And it started to document the fact that the institutions that our society as a country and in the world were built on, that were important for community, have been eroding. Even simple things as the title denotes, the bowling club, the Rotaries, your church groups, etc. These elements of bonding and gathering have been dissipating over the decades. And yet, as a species, and I'm sure you speak about it a lot to your followers, we're tribal. We're tribal species. We thrive by being connected, by having a sense of belonging. It goes back to our essence and founding as a human society. If you weren't in a tribe, you'd be eaten by something. And so this sense of isolation that we have today is disproportionately meaningful to our DNA because it's a real loss. And what I teach folks, and typically, as you mentioned, I'm in the business context, I teach organizations that the primary form of transformation, the primary form building resilience in organizations for the effectiveness of business is the team. It's the team, because we work in these groups of individuals that unfortunately don't have the high-performing attributes of having each other's backs, telling each other the truth, lifting each other up. I started this research many, many years ago when I was done with writing Never Eat Alone, which is all about, and we'll teach your audience this today, how do you go out and build the powerful network that you need to make sure that you have success in life, that you have meaning in life. But what I then found was I started researching, what about the groups of people that have each other's backs that won't let each other fail? And so I wrote the book, Who's Got Your Back? 50% of Americans say that no one has their back. Think about that. And of the 50% of Americans that say that no one really has their back, and you get into defining that, which is telling each other the truth, somebody who's always going to be generous, helping support you even when you're not around, somebody who gives you energy, lifts you up, somebody you can be fully vulnerable with, all of those elements, 60% of them who say that no one has their back are married. So that's the lay of the land, and we can fix it. And more importantly is you can fix it. Every single one of us can fix it independently by becoming proactive in building our tribe.
Let's dissect that, because I want to see how to build the tribe. And then once we are in the tribe, I recognize the following is, can we be allowed to be ourselves authentically and share ourselves vulnerably with others? Because I often found before I met a group that was so supportive to see me for who I am, I always felt like I had to be wearing a mask to feel belong to a group.
Well, you know me, I always take those masks off forcibly in any of my gatherings.
The very, very first thing you do is take off the mask.
Yeah. And that's a part of the real value. So let's define a process for everybody out. Let's start with recognizing that relationships are the conduit to your success, however you define success. When I say that is, if you're a parent and success is defined by the thriving child that you have, that you be successful. When I got my first son, Daniel, who was my foster son at the age of 12, I set about recognizing that there were a group of people that I needed to build relationships with for his success. Former foster parents who kind of knew him well, friends of his, therapists of his, coaches of his. I identified a set of individuals, his teachers, because he was thrown out of every school that he'd ever went to, and for bad behavior and unattentiveness. No, he was ADHD. The system in foster care had pumped him full of so many meds he wasn't himself. He was an angry kid, rightfully so, because he was in 21 families before he came to our family. Stack all that stuff up, and you had a kid who was just working against himself all the time, and I needed to create a tribe around that, perfectly identifying and focusing on individuals that are critical to build a relationship in order to achieve a goal, which is my son's thriving success. That's the first step. Now, a lot of people think that that's contrived. I don't know how we fell into each other, but it wouldn't surprise me if early on when I met you, I was thinking, wow, here's a successful doctor, local individual. He has a passion for changing other people's lives. I would have emotionally or intellectually put you on a list of individuals I wanted to build a relationship. Now, I don't know if it was an A priority at the time or if it was a B priority at the time. But the point is, I would have put you on a list in my head, because I've always, by the way, collected doctor friends. You and I know that there are some very famous doctors out there who've become some of my best friends like yourself. And the reason was because I knew that I could be of service to them and they could be of service to me. Now, some people say, well, that feels very contrived, but that doesn't mean just because it's purposeful doesn't mean it's fake. Like, at any point along the way, did you ever feel our relationship was fake?
Absolutely not.
But
You are the number one true embodiment of your books and your teaching.
and that's the next step, which is once you identify the focus, now you've got to bust your ass and define what you can do for them. It's all about giving. It's not, and there's a chapter in my first book, Giving Without Keeping Score. You know, when I met you and I decided this was somebody worth my time, I kept thinking, what can I do to be of service? Who can I introduce this person to? What coaching or counseling could I give? What advice could I give? Whatever. I was always focused on how do I make this human successful? I do that with everybody. I was literally, about a month ago, a CEO invited me to a dinner in San Francisco to honor the King of Bhutan, which is an amazing country. It's the happiest country in the world, which we can talk a bit about if you'd like. I don't know if you know about how they don't measure GDP, gross domestic product. They measure G&H, gross national happiness. And on the happiness index, which Harvard does, they've anointed them as the happiest country in the world, which I can talk more about as well. Now, what's interesting about that is I go to this dinner, and it was hosted by a big VC and another CEO who invited me. And I show up and it's like 20 people, and I met His Majesty and I started chatting a little bit. And within 30 seconds, I realized there were 4 people I could introduce him to, including yourself. I mentioned that to you. And as a result, he left the country, but his chief of staff reached out to me and said, the king would like to have a call with you. And I can only imagine the dozens and dozens of people he met on this little tour. I'm among the people he decided to have a call with. Well, we ended up having a call. And on that call, all I did is I prepared in advance like 5 things that based on what I knew, I thought could benefit him. He's creating a new city around mindfulness, happiness, and longevity. He's creating an entire city around, I promise that if you come to this city in Bhutan, you will live happier, longer, and have a sense of belonging. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. So I'm like naming all the people that I thought he should meet, yourself, Peter Diamandis, and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And by the end of it, he's like, would you please come over to Bhutan? And I said, I'm really sorry. I'm on my vacation right now in Bali. It's in the region, but I don't think I can make it. And then he said, I'm sending my guards to kidnap you because we need you as a part of this initiative. And I said, how about this? I'll give you a couple of hours a day during my entire vacation. And so he and I and his prime minister spent 2 hours a day all week last week. He called me at 3:30 in the morning, which is unfortunate that he doesn't do time zone switching. I guess as a king, you don't think about that last night. And the point that I'm making is that here I am, like when I was a kid, I was a poor, unemployed steelworker's son from Pittsburgh. I'm going to swear for a moment. I hope that's okay with your audience. But who the fuck would have imagined that I would have had the right to be advising a king on the creation of one of the most idyllic future cities in the world? I just pinched myself. Why does this happen? This happens because all I do is I show up and I think of generosity. And that's your ticket. That's your ticket. That was my ticket. If you read Never Eat Alone, it's what took me from a poor, unemployed steelworker's kid carrying golf clubs at a country club to the recognition that the golfers I was caddying for ended up being my mentors and giving me advice and making introductions that got me into Yale University. If you lead with generosity and you awaken people through generosity, and then, of course, we're just about to talk about this, you follow with authenticity. Once you lead with generosity, you've got someone's attention. Now you follow with authenticity. And with the Kien, I remember early on, by the way, am I going on too long? Do you want to interrupt me?
No, please. Since you brought that up, I will interrupt you so we can further dissect that, because I know some people in the audience here, we've got some busy professionals. We've got some celebrities that are not doing well because of, the strikes and the pandemic. They're going through all these things. There's some people that think, oh my gosh, I don't have anything to be generous with. I don't feel like I have time. I don't feel like I got money or whatever it is. But I think
chances are they have time. Let's start there. If I can find time, if you have a targeted individual, and I hate to use that word, but if you've identified an individual who's important to build a relationship, there's this young man named Jake, who's the son of one of the CEO clients of mine. And I sat down with Jake. He's one of these kids who came right out of UCLA or USC film school. And he really wants to be in the entertainment industry. And he started working for somebody who was the most ridiculous jackass that you could possibly imagine. And the guy was just rude, ignorant, disrespectful, all the stuff you think of when you think of the worst example of an entertainment executive. And the boy was just beside himself. And I said, look, one of the things that you have available to you right now. So assume you're leaving this asshole. Let's identify the 5 people that you would dream to work with. And he talked about nature documentaries, which is his real passion. He's an enthusiast of nature, etc. And I said, well, name the people you'd be interested in getting to know. And he named a guy, Lewis, who wrote a book, Fantastic Fungi. I did a project.
Documentary. Yeah.
Yeah, documentary, Fantastic Fungi. I said, great. What can you do for me? He's like, I don't know what I could do for him. I said, why don't you do some research? So Jake does some research and finds out that the guy has started a book. And the book is called The Gratitude Something or Other. Got it here, and I'm really embarrassed I don't have it. And apparently he's screening a new movie on the subject, on living in gratitude. By the way, you should have him on your show.
Oh, great.
Be happy to make that the introduction. What I didn't tell Jake is that I knew Lewis, but I wanted him to do it himself. So he's identifying the fact that Lewis, as a person he wanted to meet, he's done some research. The guy's got a new book. So I said, why don't you just reach out to him and offer to be free hands in helping him market his new movie and book project. Tell him you'd be happy to be a part of his marketing team. And as a result, Jake is going to the premiere and going to get to meet the guy. And now I've put a little juice behind it myself. And that's the other thing. When you tell people who you want to meet into the world, you'll be surprised by who knows who. Like I remember years ago when I was a budding young author having mentioned to my team that I had been trying to get to know Oprah because back in the day, her book club was the key ticket to success for books. Probably still is today, who knows? But one of the administrative assistants in my office said, oh, I didn't know you wanted to get to know her. My aunt is Gail's best friend, Gail King.
Yeah.
Who's Oprah's best friend. So it was through that I got to know Gail and I got to get the introduction into Oprah's team. So the point is, by putting it out there, Jake had put it out there with me. Now I had dragged it out of him, but now he knows to put it out there. And then you do your research. Like if somebody reaches out to me, like I've got I usually only serve corporate teams.
Yeah.
And I'm now about to launch a new business that one of my business partners, Ronan, is going to be starting for the consumer world, taking all of the body of our work and bringing it to individuals. I love it when people reach out to me and say, hey, I know something about that space, or I'd be happy to help, etc. And I can put them in touch with Ronan. Or the same thing, it's like, somebody reads about me, you look at my foundation and you see the things that matter to me in my life, and you can volunteer your time. Time is the essence. And don't say, nobody should say I don't have time, because if someone's a high enough priority, you make time. Like I made time for the king.
Yeah.
I was on my vacation. I made 2 hours a day for the king because he's creating something brilliant that I want to be a part of. Right. So all of us have time, and that's a universal currency that you can offer. But then you dig and you look at the research, and sometimes you just ask them, just say, hey, listen, I'm a huge fan. Someday I'm going to work for you and you don't even know it. Let me work for you now without any money. Just give me an assignment. What is it? What is it? Give me an assignment. That was basically what I was saying to the king in a much more sort of adult or organized way. But a kid like Jake could do that without being more organized.
I hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. If you are, I just wanted to let you know, join our community. There's so many free resources and a great community of people that desire health, happiness, human potential, to have more in their life, more health, more energy. And when you have those two things together, you could create more happiness, more abundance, whether it be financial, romantic, all these things in your life. And if you're just starting out, you don't know where to go, just sign up for thrivestatestarter.com, because in there you're going to get a bundle of information that includes a longevity ebook, a longevity and performance resource guide, lecture notes that come from my keynotes at Google, at Fortune 500 companies, all the insights in that keynote in lecture slide form given to you. And then finally, breathwork. I share 3 powerful breathwork exercises to access calm, which really gives you clarity and peace during the day, to access energy if you need to wake up and really motivate yourself, and finally a breathwork routine that you could do every single morning so that you could be very intentional with how you create that day. You can find all this stuff delivered free to your inbox at thrivestatestarter.com. And our community is growing. If you want to be a part of a community of people that desire the Thrive State, that are really in Thrive State themselves, and help other people along with that. You could be a part of the community. You can get group coaching from me. We do breathwork sessions, meditation sessions, and you also get to drop in and participate in podcasts in the future. You could find more about the community at mythrivestate.com. That's mythrivestate.com. So check out those resources. You're not going to be disappointed, and please enjoy the remainder of this podcast.
That's beautiful. So really have that vision and focus, then generosity. And despite what you think, you could find the time, because that is the universal currency that we can use. And you mentioned authenticity. I remember when we first met, I was just kind of pivoting out of full-time medicine, and I had the desire to do more media and speaking. And in my mind, I always felt like when I approached somebody that I felt was on a pedestal, I had to put on this mask.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the first things you told me, Kien, or not told me, Keith. We were at the gym, I believe, in, I don't remember,
Probably Barry's boot camp.
Portugal or something like that.
Oh, in Portugal. Got it.
Yeah. Over at A-Fest. And you're like, you got some good.
Is that where we met? Did we meet through Mission?
Or a little bit before. We actually met through a mutual friend, Kevin Kreider. And I found out he's speaking there, and we continued our conversations there. But you had said, Kien, I feel some great energy here, but why don't you try to leave from here? It took a lot of work to be there, because I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel.
And I think what I was feeling was a lack of real connection to, which I wanted. Everybody wants.
Yeah.
Right. You're a charismatic, good looking guy. You're focused on great things in the world. You've got your shit together, and that's attractive to people. But what I was missing at the time, which of course you've filled the cup in full and overflowing since, it's been beautiful. But what I was missing at the time was that intimate connection.
Yeah.
I felt it was very from the head.
Yeah.
I thought it was, and it wasn't braggy. I mean, you were always a humble, lovely guy, but I just didn't feel that.
Yeah.
Now, the way one gets to do that early and quick. I mean, I did that with the King. I was about to talk a little bit about, so you lead with generosity, and then how do you follow with authenticity? I mean, I did my research. It's unclear what the guy's worth, but I saw one study. It said he was worth 32 billion, and he runs a country, but not like these royalty, like in the UK. This is like his country. He's literally the royalty. He's the king, not just some figurehead. And I said, how could I connect with a person like that? But the only way I could do it was really letting him know where I came from, and just letting him know the reason I care about what he's doing is because I grew up in a town called Pittsburgh that was economically crashing around us, and my family was destitute. I swore at the time to grow up and help the world be a better place through the workplace, and help people have thriving jobs, economic prosperity, etc. And that's my driving factor, really wanting to. And, and I didn't try to assume that he had the same background. Of course he didn't. He went to Andover, he went to Oxford, he went to Harvard Business School. And I didn't even try to connect on, you went to HBS, I went to HBS. I went straight for telling him who I was. And you know what? He opened up and shared some of the things that he was. Kings are humans too. They have parents, they have wives, they have new children, they have all of these things that come with struggles and challenges and whatever. And so we bonded around an authentic fashion. And he has a people that he has to worry about in a landlocked nation that, has a lot of things that are beneficial to it, but has some things stacked up against it. He's right in between China and India and all of those challenges, etc. So just imagine what's on this man's shoulders. And we got there, but it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't led with it. I had to lead with my own vulnerability. And that's one of the things that you had to learn how to do.
Yeah.
Which is to lead with your own vulnerability. And it was so beautiful when you started to share with me your mission and some of the things that you felt you weren't achieving in your own life that made you angst-ridden and fearful and sad, which is when I just learned even to lean in and love you more and wanted to help you more. And it was just the more we wear our authentic selves out there and take risks. As a gay man, I was reading up on the King's policies for LGBTQ, and I couldn't find anything about his perspectives, but I was looking, and it was said that it is a very conservative country. LGBTQ is not really an area of positivity there. And I paused early on in the conversations. I said, Your Majesty, I want to, he actually told me I can call him HM, His Majesty. So HM, I just want to ask you something. I'm putting myself out there. I don't know how you feel about this, but I want to let you know that in case you have a stance against this for your country, for your religious beliefs, etc., I'm a gay man, and I want to make sure it's not going to be a problem for you as I continue to support. And he just smiled and laughed. He said, "We haven't cared about that for thousands of years." Now, in the back of my head, and I do some Google searching, I see that there's a little bit of a difference in the perception of what's going on in the country. So I'm looking forward to making a difference on that front.
Amazing.
In that, yeah.
Yeah, what you just mentioned right now about dropping into vulnerability, and oftentimes, I see you doing your events, and you're often asked to facilitate group meetings. The first thing you do, whatever it is you share from the heart what you're going through, and that allows other people to drop in too. Because I feel energetically when we do that, when we drop into our hearts, we're shifting into a different energetic state, and I think that's the state other people receive as humanity and love.
Exactly. Yeah. And you've learned of that. You've learned how to bring it out in people. You end up to bring that out in people beautifully.
Yeah. I would probably say earlier on during our first meeting, it was so much like, how should I appear here to seem smart, to be attractive, or to seem like someone that he would want to connect with that was up here. And I think vibrationally that I was putting up a wall against you, which you felt. And so thank you so much for being able to see that, for energetically being able to call that out. And
Well, because I cared. I did get, again, that was another one of my pieces of generosity. I call them currencies, generosities. What's a universal currency? Being authentic to somebody else and allowing them to be authentic with you, that's a beautiful currency to offer people. Some of your guests probably have that and they don't realize how valuable that is. They're one of these types of people that people always talk to. Well, that's beautiful. That's amazing. The world doesn't have enough people like you. And so if you're one of those people, that's a part of your currency. That's what you're bringing out authenticity in others is a part of your currency. I was thinking another guest, who did I say a second ago should be a guest of yours?
the guy from Fantastic Fun Guy.
Yeah, Lewis, that'd be great for you. The other person that should be a guest is somebody who just did a really bold thing. Do you remember Shin? I've introduced you to Shin in the past. Shin just came out as the very first Japanese entertainer at the level of like Justin Bieber over there.
Yeah.
Very first person ever to come out in Japan. And he was on the New York Times, etc. And he just needed to pursue his happiness. So if you want one of the top Japanese pop stars on your show, I'm happy to, I just made that intro on a text. It'd be a great one for you.
Oh, I would love that. And potentially even for this mental health summit, choosing our happiness. Because here's the thing about vulnerability is feeling safe to finally express who you truly are. And I think for a long time, there were certain aspects of myself that didn't feel safe to share, that I felt like needed to be hidden, and I needed to show that part of the mask. How much work and what was the type of work you did that allowed you to finally drop in, to share the fullest aspects of you? And if you wouldn't mind sharing, at what point in your professional career did you feel completely free to share that you were a gay man?
Oh, wow. Well, that's a big one. Yeah, so much I want to answer along that question. Let me start with the fact that it's an evolution. You don't turn the switch on overnight. I wrote a book and there's a chapter in Never Eat Alone. 20 years ago, I wrote Never Eat. There's a chapter in that book about being authentic. And it was about being at a dinner party and mentioning that at that dinner party, it was a business dinner party. I had mentioned that I just suffered a really massive breakup and I was crushed. And everybody outpoured their sentiment in their own experiences. And it moved the dinner party from being this transactional dinner party to being an intimate, amazing dinner party, because I was willing to share that I was going through a hard time. But at the time, I didn't share I was gay. I just shared that I had a breakup. So it's okay to be incremental in what is authentic to you. When you're ready, it's okay to share what you want to share. Back in the day, there was no Will and Grace. There was no Barney Frank. There was no Tim Cook. There was nobody out there as an icon of success who was gay at the time. So I didn't imagine that I could be that authentic. So I was authentic about my emotions and my breakup, but not about my sexuality. And then over the years, you become, if you're a gay person, sometimes you incrementally share. You share to your intimates. You sometimes come out with your family, not first, but maybe a little later after your friends, once you get a posse and a sense of pride around you, which is why pride is so important, to have people be seen for who they are. And then ultimately, you share to some executives that you think it's okay with, and then ultimately you become more capable of sharing openly in public. But I'll have to say there's still times, not as much anymore, but even a few years ago, There were times when in the back of my head, I was making a judgment call on this particular conservative manufacturing team that I was coaching, how safe it was for me to use pronouns of my partner versus just talk about my fiance. So that was important, that to recognize that even somebody with my success, my position, still sometimes did the calculus of will they accept me? And over time, it just gets easier and better as you get practice. It's all about practice. All of this is about practice. And being vulnerable, if you look about the person who wrote Never Eat Alone, he was one degree of vulnerable. And the person who's sitting in front of you today is another degree of vulnerable. And I would be, you know me in my capacity for transparency now. I mean, there's so much. And I have to tell you, probably one of the biggest things that brought real transformation for me was writing the book, Who's Got Your Back, and researching the 12-step programs. If so many out there who may be struggling today, there is a 12-step program that's available to you, whether or not you have an identified addiction. It's called Al-Anon. And Al-Anon is originally was created for those who were in relationship with alcoholics. And now it's for people who feel that they are in relationship with people that they can't control, or the desire to be in control of your life in a way that you feel you're not able to, and it frustrates and creates anxiety, which is really everybody in the world. We all are a little out of control in what we'd like to control. And what Al-Anon teaches you is that it's all your stuff. And what's fun about Al-Anon is that you don't have to walk in and say, I'm an alcoholic. You walk in and say, I need to be a part of this tribe, and let go. The fun thing is they work through the 12 steps. The Dalai Lama said that the 12 steps are the greatest gift, God's greatest gift to mankind in the last 200 years. And it's beautiful because it helps you identify a ruthless moral inventory on yourself. It helps you be generous to others. It helps you be humble, and you do it all in the context of a group of people. And then after a meeting, you go have fellowship. So it's like, if you're lonely today, you can find your church groups. If you don't feel comfortable in a secular society, if you don't feel comfortable in a religious setting, there's tons of places that have already set community up for you. Al-Anon happens to be another one. But find your tribe, find community, work hard at it. And then if you want to do it yourself, you can. I understand that for some may be just a little harder lifting. All you really need, by the way, is one person. If you find one person you could partner with. There are times, Ken, that you and I said, hey, you and I think about who do we want to get to know. Let's get to know them. Let's have a dinner party at my house. Let's invite whoever you want to invite. I'll invite who I want to invite, that sort of thing. So you can do it in partnership with just one individual as a small baby step, but find your tribe and create your tribe proactively. And when you do, and you show up, there's a simple practice I love to do at my dinners. The simplest is called a sweet and sour. Everybody goes around and says, what's going on sweet in their lives and what's going on sour right? That's a beautiful opening. Another one is called a personal professional check-in, which is a little bit more vulnerable, where everybody goes around and says, what are you struggling with personally? What are you struggling with professionally? Two simple exercises when a group of people get engaged, or even just individuals. Like you and I always do PPCs. When we sit down for lunch at Rio Bistro, we always do a PPC. All right, catch me up personally. What's going on? What are you struggling with? What's going on professionally? What are you struggling with? Yes. I understand you're doing wonderful things. Let's get to the struggles. We always do that. It's like, I get you're doing glorious things and I love you for it, but let's get to the struggles, because we can hold space for that. And that's what real friends are for.
Personal, professional, what was the C?
Personal professional check-in.
Yeah.
PPC, personal professional check-in.
Well, Keith, what you shared today was very, very valuable. I think you put a structure to really, how do you find community? And then within the structure, the inner work you need to do for each too, recognizing that you have value, at least with your time, but probably so much of value in just who you are as a person you could offer someone. And then finally dropping into authenticity and letting them know that it's okay to slowly reveal the different layers that's within you. How do people find out more about you now?
If you really want to go deep on this idea of peer-to-peer support and having a tribe that supports you, go to Who's Got Your Back. That was the #1 New York Times bestseller. Who's Got Your Back? If you want to know how to bring this to life in a company, then go to a book I wrote right before the pandemic, Leading Without Authority, which is bringing all of this to life as to how you can manifest relationships to be a leader in the company, even though in your life, even though you may not have the title of lead. It doesn't matter. How do you lead? How do you be the agent of change?
Oh, thank you so much. Keith, thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, your teachings always. I hope to connect again in person very, very soon. Thanks for being on the summit.
Thank you. Love you, brother.
I hope you enjoy that episode of the Thrive State podcast. And if you're finding that this content is really helping you and your family members, please consider supporting our mission and our cause of elevating health, happiness, and human potential for people all over the world. You can do so by making sure that you have subscribed to this podcast, sharing it with your friends and family members, and leaving us a 5-star review wherever podcasts are heard. All these things are going to really help elevate the show and to give us the resources to continue to bring more content just like this to yourself as well as the people that you love. If you haven't already, you might want to consider joining our community. We actually have a community where people get to engage with me in group sessions where we do breath work, meditation, where we do challenges together, really to be able to get us access to health, happiness, human potential, so that we could have longevity and performance in our life as well. You can check out our community at mythrivestate.com. That's mythrivestate.com. And if you haven't already, pick up a copy of my book, Thrive State. It really gives you all the tools, the pillars that you need to create a blueprint to control the energetics of your life. Who are you? How do you show up in the world? The choices that you consistently make create an energy in your body, and you can control this. And when you can control that, you also control the messages you give to your DNA that gives you access, again, to optimal health, longevity, and peak performance. And let me also just share a free gift to you. If you haven't already, please pick up my longevity and performance bundle where I share lecture notes, ebooks, breathwork exercises, and longevity and performance resources at thrivestatestarter.com. Thank you so much for being a part of this community. Thank you for helping us grow. Remember always, my friends, that you are your best medicine.